I'm delaying the continuation of the service talk until tomorrow at the request of Joe Killian, who is teaching today. So tomorrow we can deal with some of the issues of social political action and service, and I'd like to tell you about seva, both as a foundation and as a concept. So today we'll just knock off 3 other topics: aging, death, and relationships. We'll also end today with some chanting of the Sri Ram mantra for maybe 20 minutes or so, for those that want to stay at 4. Sometimes I say, what kind of a business am I in? I mean, I seem like a reasonably happy person these days, much more than I used to be. And yet I talk about suffering, death, aging, poverty. I mean, one would think that I have a rather sour outlook on life from listening to the topics I discuss. But, and people say, well, Emmanuel talks about joy and pleasure and happiness. Why don't you? Well, he can probably do it, but he doesn't have a body. It's easy. But also, there's another way of looking at it, is that I am trying to root out those kinds of clingings of mind in us that take away from our joy and our delight in the dance of life. And fears like the fear of suffering, the fear of death, the fear of old age, tend to undercut the moment-to-moment joy of life. So there are 2 ways to deal with these things. One is you try denial, but it doesn't work, because denial means that you put something in a room and you close the door and you put something in front of the door and you say, I don't want to talk about that and I don't want to think about that. What that does is it requires a certain amount of energy to keep that blocked. It's what Freud used to call cathected libido. It's energy that is blocked. It's used up now in guarding the things you're not going to think about. And the result is that you are somewhat lame by it. You don't have the free use of all your energy anymore, because some of it is used in what are called defenses, in denial, repression, displacement, etc. So that method doesn't really work in the sense of, because joy is another way of talking about free energy. And if you don't have free energy, there's no way you can have the joy. The second way of approaching these things is to develop an exploration of the philosophical underpinnings that cause the suffering. In other words, like the concept of who you think you are, which we've been talking about for the past few days. That's one of the root causes of suffering, as the Buddha pointed out, that if you think you are somebody, you're going to suffer. And the minute you're not busy defining yourself in a finite way, you are extricating yourself from suffering just by the shift in your philosophical stance. It's by shifting your perspective or shifting your context, if you will, for existence. And when you are deep into meditative practice, you begin to see the arising and the existing and the falling away of phenomena. They're just coming, and some of the phenomena are the nature of a pleasant experience, some in the nature of an unpleasant experience, some in the nature of pain, some in the nature of sorrow, some joy, some pleasure, some this. And they are merely phenomena that arise, exist, and pass away, just like the sound of that engine and the breeze and the feelings of your body and the digestion of your lunch. They're just phenomena coming up, and your awareness moves from one to the other, one after another. And as you pull your consciousness, your conscious more of which your awareness is rather than all the things it's aware of, you just see these phenomena coming and grabbing your consciousness like this and that and the next. And you notice that one minute you're unhappy, and then the next minute something catches your eye. You can be walking down the path full of sadness, and you see a flower, and the flower does something to you. And then in the flower, a bug appears, and you have another reaction, and then something comes and eats the bug, and you have a third reaction. I recall I used to meditate. Many years ago, I was at Big Sur. I was a guest of the Esalen Institute, and they gave me a ranch to live on, and the ranch came with a pussy cat. And the cat, every morning I would sit in meditation, and the cat would go out and forage for its breakfast. And then because it liked me and I liked it, it would bring its breakfast in to eat it with me, so to share breakfast. And it would come in and sit between my legs with a lizard or a small rabbit or something, often which was still alive. And I would be sitting with my eyes closed, developing great spiritual presence, and with my little pussycat coming in to share its loving breakfast. And suddenly I would hear this squeaking and this lizard's tail flapping, and hear crunching of skulls, and I couldn't decide who to hate. I mean, I couldn't hate my pussycat, yet this pussycat had just gone out and grabbed something and was killing it and eating it. And I just was sitting with life and death and nature and the way of things, and it was like a gift for my meditation. It was a fierce gift, and it was just a natural set of phenomena. I wasn't going to make the cat a vegetarian. That didn't seem likely, although some people do, I understand. So that way is to cultivate the mind so that you can watch the phenomena arising and falling away, and then that includes the phenomena that disturb you. And you see fear and anxiety and all those things arising, existing, and as you identify with them less and less, they have less hold on you, and they come and then they pass and they go. So the context, the philosophical context, is one of these methods. And this third method is to go directly towards these phenomena that upset you and try to get over the reactive nature you have to them by observing your reactions and sitting with them and allowing them to be what they are, like I did with the cat, and just allowing these phenomena to occur until you are comfortable. Confucius said, one who sees the way in the morning can gladly die in the evening. And that once you have an understanding of who we are and what we are about and what the universe is from a spiritual as well as a material point of view, then death loses its power to frighten you so much. Even the mystery of it is something you are welcome to be comfortable with rather than finding aversive all the time. Now, the sequence of events that happened for me personally about these issues was that as a result of my early psychedelic experiences, I experienced what appeared to be my own psychological death, the end of myself, and then the reawakening of that. And I felt what would be called a death-rebirth experience. Obviously, I didn't physically die. I'm still here. And at the time, it seemed like something that was unique to the experience I was having, and I found it, what we used to call it, ineffable, indescribable. I couldn't describe it. I just say, oh, wow, man, I had this experience. It just, and I couldn't talk about it. And then as time went on, when we hung around with people like Aldous Huxley and Alan Watts and so on, they started to share with Tim Leary and I these books, specifically the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which was this manual read by monks 2,500 years ago to read to somebody as they were dying to help them through the process of dying. And I would find in them descriptions of what had happened to me under a psychedelic. So I saw that there was a parallel, and that led me to a study of Eastern philosophy and mysticism. And it led me to a very different understanding of what death was about, philosophically. Now, what pieced together for me was both the direct experiences I had through meditation. Like in some of my meditations, I would experience myself sitting up in the ceiling with a long blue luminous cord reaching down to my physical body on the ground. And the body I was not in, I was out there, my awareness was there, and I saw this luminous cord, and I saw the body, and I had this as a direct experience. Now, I, as a psychologist, could say interesting hallucination, but it was as much as I'd say about you, you're an interesting hallucination to me, or you would say that about me at the moment. It had that kind of validity to it. So the direct experience was one of the ways that I started to understand that who I was in the last analysis was not my body, and that dying might not be what I thought it was, because I had been trained as a scientist, so I was a philosophical materialist. So when you're dead, you're dead. And now I began to sense that that wasn't quite the way it was, and that what I was wasn't what died. Now, then when I was in India, I started to be around people like my guru, and started to collect the following experiences or stories. A story. My guru was in a little temple by the side of the road during the night. There's just a few people there. It's a very, just a simple little thing by the side of the road. And they usually slept outside around the fire. And around 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning, he said, he shook people and he said, I want chapatis and dal. Well, dal is lentils, you probably know, and chapatis are flatbread. And I want chapatis and dal. And they said, well, Baba, you already ate your dinner. And he was very insistent. He said, I want chapatis and dal. Now, again, we in the West would say, well, he's really over the edge a little bit. You know, he's getting old and getting a little confused. But in India, the way they treat people like this is they say, who can understand the ways of the guru? Okay. So they build the fire, and they make the dough, and they make the chapatis, and they make the dal, and it's ready at around 2:45 in the morning. And he eats voraciously as if he's never seen food before. And then he goes to bed, and they just think nothing more of it. It's just another one of those weird things that gurus do. Around 10 o'clock the next day, a telegram arrives saying that one of his old devotees died the previous night at 2 in the morning. And when the telegram is read to my guru, he says, see, that's why I wanted the chapatis and dal. Well, now they didn't see why he wanted the chapatis and dal, but now he had piqued their curiosity, you see. So they started to bug him, and of course he wouldn't say anything more. That's the way he did it. He'd just kind of leave you hanging there. And finally, after a couple of days, he said, as if he was talking to children, don't you understand? He said, as so-and-so was dying, he wanted dal and chapatis, and I didn't want him to have to take another birth just for that. Okay? Now, you think, oh my God, I mean, what's going on here? You know, just assume he's not crazy for a moment. See, that's the one. It's easier to assume he's crazy. You get rid of these stories easier if you think he's... Then they can go through you quick. But if you assume there might be method in the madness, it's a little more delicate. He's walking with one of his old devotees, and he suddenly starts to giggle, which he was prone to do. And the devotee says, "What are you giggling about?" And he said, "So-and-so just died," which was a woman a devotee he had known for years and years, an old woman. And this fellow who was with him, who was on very familiar terms with him, said, "You butcher, what are you laughing about? If she cried, I thought you liked her." And Maharaji looked with kind of confusion. He said, "What do you want me to do? Make believe I'm one of the puppets?" Make believe I'm one of the puppets? Can you hear that? Do you want me to make believe the whole drama? Is that real? Is that what you want me to do? You want me to make believe? Oh, she died. Oh, she lived. It's like hide and seek. Oh, where are you? Oh, now I see you. You know, how much do you want me to juice it up? That's what he's saying. But let me tell you this is a story I'm sure some of you have heard from my lectures. It's about a fellow named Tony. Tony was, I met Tony in 1969. I'd come back from India, and I was up in my little cabin on my father's land up in New Hampshire, cooking my own food over a fire and trying to stay Indian, stay pure. Didn't work, but I tried. And people would come and see me. And one of the people who came to see me was this young fellow. He came from New York, the Lower East Side of New York. His parents were a Russian scientist who had defected. And Tony came to see me. They were quite wealthy. The mother had a lot of money, and they had a home in New Hampshire and a home in Arizona, but he was living in New York with his girlfriend. And he came to see me, he said, because he wanted to study yoga with me. In those days, I was doing 4 or 5 hours of hatha yoga a day. So I said I'd be happy to teach him what I knew, and we started, and he would come. He stayed at his parents' place nearby, and he would come over once a week. And within 2 months, he knew more about everything I was teaching him than I did. He was, I guess, 19 or so. So by the fall, I said, "Well, Tony, you know, you've really gone beyond my capacities. I think you need a real teacher now." And I gave him a list of possible teachers. And he said, "I think I know the basics." And he said, "I'd like to go into a cave on my parents' ranch in Arizona. And if I could just come and see you once a month, I think that would be sufficient." I said, "Well, you do what you want." So he did that. And every month, wherever I was, he'd fly to see me. And he was doing long fasts, and he was getting thinner and more yogic looking. And he was doing a lot of pranayama, raising energy through breath control. And we had practiced how you take in the breath, and then after you hold it for a certain length of time, you bring your awareness to the bottom of your spine where there is a serpent coiled 3.5 times with its head pointed down, and you hit the serpent on the top of the head with your awareness, and the serpent raises its head if you're holding your breath properly, and it starts to go up your spine, up the sushumna, and that's the awakening of Kundalini, and then all kinds of things happen. I mean, everything. And he was playing with that a little bit, working with it. So that was through the winter, and then in March I didn't hear from him, which I thought nothing much about. In April I got a letter from his mother, and his mother said, the letter said, "I thought you'd be happy to know that Tony entered Mahasamadhi." That means the great samadhi. It means the great, it's death. It's the way you die when you're a spiritual being. You die into samadhi. Samadhi is one thing, and then Mahasamadhi means you left your body permanently when you did it. It's just a strange way for a mother in the West to say her son died. She said, "He's gone into Mahasamadhi, and I am just so happy." Well, now, I'm enough of a Westerner, so mothers saying they're happy their sons died when they're 19 years old does something to me, and I don't believe it. She came to see me about a month later, and she had a hysteria about her, and I didn't think she was really that happy, and I thought, you're right about my suppositions. But she brought his diary with her. And I opened the diary, and the diary said, the last pages of the diary were, "Dear Mother, I have finished my work. Tell Rdass that I am with Christ and Maharaji, and that I am finished. Mother, I will watch over you. You need have no fear or concern. Vaya con Dios, go with God, Tony." Well, that's a pretty extraordinary final statement for somebody. But the thing that impressed me as I looked at it was the nature of the writing. The writing, well, it took many pages to write that because it was a big, scrawly writing. And the rest of the diary wasn't like that. And I thought to myself, where have I seen that scrawly writing before? And then I remembered that in the days when I used to take LSD, frequently, I still take LSD now and then, but in those days I took it frequently, there were times when at the highest point of the experiment trip, I would find the greatest wisdom of the universe. I would finally understand the kernel that explained everything in the universe. And I knew my mind was going so fast I was going to forget it. So I would stagger across the floor to the desk and grab a pencil, and I would scrawl this wisdom, which the next day, it would be one word that would explain everything in the universe, which next day would turn out to be be or is or something which would mean nothing to me the next day. But that night it meant everything. And so I thought to myself, this looks very much like he was under acid when he wrote this. So she said to me, "You do think he was enlightened, don't you?" I said, "Well, I don't really know. How would I know?" I mean, I couldn't imagine any student of mine getting enlightened. I mean, that, first of all, didn't seem, it not only didn't seem fair, it didn't seem possible, all right? So I said, "But I do know who would know. My guru in India would know. I'll tell you what, why don't you send me a picture of Tony, and when I'm in India next year, I'll ask my guru." So she sent me his high school graduation picture, which was a real high school graduation picture. They all look the same, you know, that kind of look. And I put it in my bag, and I put it out of my mind. About a week later, a fellow called me up, and he said, "I'd like to come and see you." And he came and saw me, and he says, "I've got to confess something." He said, "I went to see Tony with a friend of mine the day he died." He said, "I've got to tell somebody this." And he said, "I brought some acid, and we took acid together. And we went swimming. And while we were swimming, Tony came over to me and went to embrace me. We were all under acid. And I went into a homosexual panic, and I pushed him away. And he got very paranoid, and he told us to leave, and we left, and that was the last time I saw him alive." Now, the psychologist in me says, "See, now I understand what happened. He was having a bad trip. He went back to his cave. He did pranayama or something and didn't have the control because of the acid. He overburdened his heart because they found that blood had come out of his nose on the wall of the cave, and he had died from, he had burst a blood vessel." I said, "That doesn't sound like he finished his work to me. This was clearly a psychological death." All right, now with all that data in my mind, I go to India. And I can't find my guru for maybe 6-7 months because he's always hiding and you never know where he is. Finally, I come across him. And I've forgotten about the picture. It's in my valise. And one day, he's going through pictures of various people around in the group. He's going through their bags, their jolas, things like this. And he's looking at pictures and saying, "Ma, Pa," and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's all Mickey Mouse, what he does. You know, you'd think there'd be serious, deep teachings, but there aren't. There's just this kind of, take tea. You got enough tea? Have more tea. You know, he's throwing apples at you. You can count on the fact you try to meditate, he'll throw an apple, it'll land right in your balls. I mean, you can absolutely count on it when you... sitting with him. He just has that rascality about him, you know. So he's looking at these pictures, and suddenly I remember this picture. So I excuse myself, and I run across the temple yard to my room, and I grab the picture, and I rush back. And I put the high school picture right down on the table on which he's sitting, right in front of the tucket on which he's sitting. And he's talking, he's looking around, he's not noticing the picture. Finally, he looks down, and he looks at the picture, this high school graduation picture, and he looks at me, and he says, "He's dead." It's pretty good, you know. I mean, I love those little twists, you know. I said, "Yeah." He looked at it again, he closed his eyes, he said, "He died from your medicine," meaning the acid. I said, "Yeah, that's what I thought." See, I mean, in my mind it clicked in that, right? And he read that thing in my mind. He says, "Nay." He said, "He finished his work. He is one with Christ. His mother should not worry. He is watching over her." And word for word, he quoted the diary to me. And he said, his mother should go with God. And I said, "But he took acid. I mean, how could he be enlightened?" He says, "He finished his work. He is with Christ now. He is one with Christ." And the way he said it, I understood that the way you exit the stage isn't the critical matter. You leave when you've finished your curriculum, and you may leave the stage because the hook comes out and takes you off, or you may go off dancing. It doesn't really make a hell of a lot of difference. When it's time for you to leave, you leave. Whichever way you got to get off, you get off. You know, you may trip off and phony your way out, but you get off the stage because that's the end of your number. There's a Japanese monk who's dying, and he hasn't written his death verse. Japanese monks, Zen masters, are supposed to write a death verse, and the students are very upset. They keep whispering, "Master, you haven't written your death verse." And he's finally says, "Oh, I haven't written my death verse." And he grabs his brush and he calligraphies madly and dies. And it says, "Birth is thus, death is thus, verse or no verse, what's the fuss?" There is a certain quality of lightness. Like that thing I said the other day about Ramana Maharshi. He's dying and they say, "Don't leave us." His devotees say, "Don't leave us, don't leave us." And he says, "Don't be silly. Where could I go? It's like I'm just dropping my body. I'm just selling the Ford. It's no big deal. What are you getting so upset about?" Now, once you have a sense that who you are doesn't end at your death, who you think you are doesn't end at your death, or who you are doesn't end at your death, you can put it at different levels, that there is a continuity of something or other, you anticipate with your intellect that death is a transitional moment in which there's going to be a very dramatic transition and some surprises in store, but it isn't going to be the end. The minute that as that philosophy is embedded more deeply in your structure of perception, you can start to approach death in a different way. Now, in the East, all of life is seen as a preparation for the moment of death. It's designed to make you so conscious and present that as you come to your moment of death, you are conscious and present. How conscious and present? It's in the Tibetan Book of the not in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, in the Tibetan preparation for dying. You are instructed to notice Just keep absolutely clear, just noticing phenomena occurring. Like Aldous Huxley died that way. He couldn't speak anymore because he had cancer of the throat, but he wrote on his little pad. He took LSD to die with his wife next to him. And he wrote on the pad, "Now I no longer feel my legs. Now my thighs are growing cold." And he just watched the phenomena happening. And he stayed right in the moment, moment by moment by moment. And in the Tibetan tradition, they advise you to notice, for example, you notice the earth element leaving, and there is a heaviness, and you note heaviness. Then you notice the water element leaving, and there is dryness, and you note dryness. And then the fire element leaves, and you notice coldness. And then the air element leaves, and you notice that the out-breath is longer than the in-breath. And then, the next moment. In other words, you stay so close to just what's going on moment to moment that you don't even pull back into that conceptual model of I am somebody who is dying. Because that already is a suffering. That already has a continuity of personality about it. You don't even stay with the concept of dying. You are just in the phenomena as they are occurring, moment by moment by moment by moment. Now, when you are with somebody who is dying, you will find often that they are not really interested, that the words don't do it for you, and that the teaching isn't really appropriate at that moment. And that all you can offer them is that quality in you that allows that death is a transformation, that the quality, that what you have with that other person is impervious to time and space, that you'll miss their form, but yet you sense the continuity, and you are with them in the moment, just moment by moment with them, and you just keep quieting and emptying and being present. Now this, now water, now holding, now hand, now this, without any of the melodramatic psychological overlay. We just so tend to milk melodramas, and death is the biggest drama going in town, and we can't help but milk it. I mean, people that haven't had enough excitement in life, when they're around a death, boy, they can't tell enough people afterwards. It's just such a big drama in their life. And it's just another set of phenomena in which you, by not getting caught in the melodrama, which is one step back from it, but by staying in the phenomena themselves, you come into the moment, which is one of the secrets for getting deeper into the truth of the universe, by just coming into the moment as it is. And being with the preciousness of the moment. It's the story of the man who's being chased by the tiger, Paul Rep's story, and he goes over the edge and he's holding onto a little branch, and there's a tiger below him at the bottom of the cliff waiting to eat him, and a tiger above him waiting to eat him. He's holding onto this branch, and a black mouse and a white mouse come, and they start to eat away the branch he's holding. He's in a very precarious position. And he becomes aware that there is one little strawberry bush a few feet away, about a foot away, and there's one strawberry on it. And he reaches out and he takes the strawberry. How sweet it tastes. That's it. How sweet it tastes. That's what you've got. This moment. This moment. You don't know whether you've got the next moment or not. And the last moment's gone already. You just have this moment, and this moment, and this moment. And one of these moments is the moment you drop your body, and it's just another moment. And you may need a whole lifetime of preparation to be able to treat that as another moment, instead of, wow, whew, here I go, wow, which is, all that stuff is going to grab you. And the whole idea of why they prepare for death is so that they don't grab at life or push away pain at the moment of death. Because when you grab or push and you go out grabbing or you go out pushing, that's what defines the next round. You want more earth? Send them around again, Charlie. And again, and again, and again. So that you define the next round. Now, if you have no feeling at all, no sense of the idea of continuity of awareness beyond death, then none of this means much to you. And the best you can do is to feel that there is an incredible mystery at the edge before birth and after death. And then the question is, how do you approach a mystery? Do you expect the worst or not? And that has to do with your personality. And there's a way of approaching mystery with wonder and ah instead of yuck and ugh. And of course, you remember Emmanuel's line, death is like taking off a tight shoe, and it's absolutely safe. Now, I've read this. And what you do when you're with somebody that has just died, again, you have to be intuitive and trust your own being. But if I understand what I have been led to understand and feel intuitively is correct, is that for the most part, most of the people that we know that will die are reasonably confused after they die to find out they're still around. And since they do not remember having been out of their body consciously, since they are still aware they must be alive, except they look and they see that their body is there and they aren't in it and they are confused. There is a whole body of literature you know now called the near-death experiences, the NDEs, that describe people who got out and then were sent back. They went and they met old friends and they came to a gate and somebody said, no, you haven't finished your work, go on back. And they go back and they come in screaming and they wish they weren't and they were just about to go and they don't want to go. The other day, my father, who is 88, who has been in a very deep inner quiet for almost a year and a half. Well, this happened 2 months ago, actually, and then it happened again last week. 2 months ago, one was very vivid, because it was the first time in a year and a half he had come out at all. Up until then, all he said was hi and yes and no. From somebody who was very garrulous, he just quieted. And then this experience happened that Ken, who helps Dad out, heard Dad talking at around 4 in the morning, and he went in to be with Dad to see what was going on. And Dad had his eyes open, and Dad was talking to his dead brother. And Dad looked at Ken. Dad has never mentioned death or aging or anything. He doesn't talk about these things. And when I talk about them and he's around, he just goes in the other room. Or he used to. And he said to Ken, I want to get out of here. And Ken said, well, Mr. Alpert, where do you want to go? He says, I want to get out of here. So Ken took it at the most common denominator. He said, would you like to go in the other room? Dad says, yes. So they got up, and Dad walks on a walker, and he's very frail, and he can't even lift the walker. He just pushes it along the ground. We've got wheels on the walker now, and he just kind of shuffles along. He shuffled in the other room, and he's saying, what am I doing in this old body? Why are my legs so weak? And he sits down in the chair, and he says, where's Phyllis? And Ken said, well, she got very sick last year and she died. That was his wife. He says, that's silly. I was just lying in bed holding her hand. And then he proceeded to talk about various dead people that he had just been with, without any realization they were dead, by the way. Then he said, what am I doing in this old body? I want to get out of here. And all day long, he talked a blue streak, telling stories, remembering all details. He got up and he walked without a cane, without a walker. sat down and played the piano. This is somebody who's been sitting like this for a year and a half. Went and visited his sister and talked with her all day about old times, constantly saying, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? Ken said it was like a 30-year-old in an 80-year-old body. And it was as if he had, because one of the things that is repeated often in the literature is the description that as you leave your body, you don't experience yourself any longer in the form you left your body in, of sick, of old, of any of those things, but in a very light, spacious way, in a very light way, and very comfortable. And I experienced, what I interpreted was happened was he went out, he started to go, he met all these beings, and then he came back for one reason or another that I don't understand. But at this moment he was aware that he was back and that he was on the wrong side of whatever that thing was, and he wanted to be on the other side. Because everybody he knew died already, except me, and he doesn't even know who I am most of the time. He calls me kiddo. He tries to remember. He says, well, good night, kiddo. You can see him really trying. So that one of the instructions when you're with somebody after dying is to reassure them that it's all right, that they have indeed died. First of all, a lot of beings don't know they've died, so it's nice to tell them, yes, you've died. It's all right. And the general idea for somebody that is lost somebody is to, for some days afterwards, to light a candle and sit and talk to that being and say all the things that you would like to say to them that you might not have said to them, and constantly suggesting they go on with their work, that you will be perfectly able to handle yourself, that it hurts like hell and you'll miss them, but you're not pulling on them. Because there are beings that stay around because somebody's pulling on them. They never can leave because the pull of love is so strong. And then people say, well, if my partner died 10 years ago, can I still talk to them? Haven't they gone on with whatever they got to do? And the answer is yes, of course they have. But they've gone on into a body, but their awareness is still available to you. Now, this is an interesting thing. I'm talking stuff that some of you are saying, what kind of nutty fruitcake is this I'm listening to? Others of you are really open and hearing it, and I just have to deal with that situation. Okay? Because I'm not pulling any of the punches. I'm just sharing what I understand the world to be. Is that when you meet a being after death, this is a being you have probably known through many, many, many incarnations. But you meet them in the way that you are recently most familiar knowing them. So that you meet them even after time. If you read Autobiography of a Yogi, Yukteswar, who was the guru of Yogananda, comes back to see Yogananda after he has died. And he describes the fourth plane in which, he says, when somebody graduates from that, the highest spirit, the highest consciousness comes to the celebration in the form that the being most worshipped. So they have, I can imagine a closet full of costumes. They've got Christ, and they've got Buddha, and they've got all the different costumes, and they put on the costume that's appropriate, which is putting on the form that's appropriate, so that you would recognize the divine thing you have worshipped through that form. And people, you get to wonder, is Christ and Allah, Christ and Muhammad, are Krishna and Ram, are these all, as the Bhagavad Gita says, just the same being that embodies itself from time to time in a form that is appropriate to the situation in order to awaken people, but it's really just the one being that keeps coming into one form or another to pass on a teaching. And it's the same teaching in essence, but just different and appropriate to the different time. So that you may make contact through your heart with a being that has passed on and that has gone on to other work, and you meet them, and you are familiar with them, and you know them, and their astral form or their subtle body is meeting you in this plane, while they may have another gross body and be doing other work at the same time. I always like the fact that there are beings that just embody themselves to give us some teaching and then leave again. They only come and they look like real people, but they're not exactly. They're called shades, astral shades. And I like to wonder which of you is. See? And you would come with a history and it would all look real. I mean, it would look like you were a real person, but if you followed them around the corner, there'd be nobody there. You know, they just disappear into thin air. When I this is a letter that, again, some of you have heard. It's a letter I wrote, and this is a tough letter for you, and this will sort of cap the issue about the work on dying for the moment, and we'll go into aging, going backwards. This is a letter I wrote to the parents of a girl who, she was 11 years old, and she was the daughter of a Jewish couple in Oregon, and she went with her girlfriend to the Jewish Community Center to play tennis, and she was never seen again alive, and her raped and mutilated body was found. Both of their bodies were found. And I was called that night and told that these people had been to workshops and they had read my books and tapes and stuff, and that maybe something from me would be helpful to them at the moment. And I sat down to write something, and I couldn't imagine any more horrible grief and pain than what they were experiencing. And I found that at the level of somebody caring about that, I couldn't write the letter, and I really had to meditate my way beyond myself in order to write the letter. And this is the letter that I wrote. Dear Steve and Anita, Rachel finished her work on Earth and left the stage in a manner that leaves those of us left behind with a cry of agony in our hearts as the fragile thread of our faith is dealt with so violently. Is anyone strong enough to stay conscious through such teaching as you are receiving? Probably very few, and even they would have only a whisper of equanimity and spacious peace amidst the screaming trumpets of their rage, grief, horror, and desolation. I can't assuage your pain with any words, nor should I, for your pain is Rachel's legacy to you. Not that she or I would inflict such pain by choice, but there it is. And it must burn its purifying way to completion. For something in you dies when you bear the unbearable. And it is only in that dark night of the soul that you are prepared to see as God sees and to love as God loves. Now is the time to let your grief find expression. No false strength. Now is the time to sit quietly and speak to Rachel and thank her for being with you these few years and encourage her to go on with her work, knowing that you will grow in compassion and wisdom from this experience. In my heart, I know that you and she will meet again and again and recognize the many ways in which you have known each other. And when you meet, you will in a flash know what now it is not given to you to know. Why this had to be the way it was. Our rational minds can never understand what has happened. But our hearts, if we keep them open to God, will find their own intuitive way. Rachel came through you to do her work on earth, which included her manner of death. Now her soul is free, and the love that you can share with her is invulnerable to the winds of changing time and space. Balance that is required. The human heart in us, which feels the incredible pain of their predicament, and that higher wisdom that is rooted in a faith that comes through some kind of intuitive understanding that allows you to bear the unbearable. That's the balancing act I was talking about before, of our true humanity, which includes our animal nature, our human emotional being, and also this divine part of ourselves that sees it all as it is, understands it, sees souls taking birth, doing their work, leaving the stage, sees it all and understands the way it's all unfolding intuitively, not intellectually, and has a sense of the word is delicate here. The word perfection has been vetoed by people in the group. The word rightness doesn't seem right. The appropriateness isn't quite right. An understanding of how it is. An understanding of how it is. Why the cat is eating the lizard. So I don't blame the cat, and I don't feel pain for the lizard, and I don't feel pain for the cat, and I don't feel pain for me, but I do feel all that, and I don't at the same moment. Those are the balances that we develop simultaneously. Because of my interest in this work, I have been, over the past 10 years, developing what's called the Dying Project, which was an attempt to bring death out of the closet and also bring it out as a conscious, growing opportunity. The issue of death as an opportunity for people to grow, to face the deepest stuff in themselves. We have different levels of dying, the way we treat it in this culture. You go from the intensive care unit, which treats the body only. We will have no children and no cats in here. We'll keep you alive with everything we've got. That's one level of death. Death through ICU. Then along came hospice with, out of the English hospice movement, which said that is psychologically not humane, and we should surround people with a support system psychologically to help it and make it as easy and comfortable for them to die as possible. The problem with the hospice movement is it still treats death as loss, as failure, as error. The next level out is the spiritual level, which sees death as an appropriate phenomena in the way of things and says, let's use it to grow and awaken. And this was where I wanted to put my juice. So one of the things we did was we started a center, a place where people could come to die consciously. They could come to be surrounded by people who weren't dramatizing the whole thing, who weren't getting lost in the death, but helping them to stay awake. The idea was to put together, since there are no professional dyers, bring together people like me that wanted to be around people who were dying in order to work on myself, around my own stuff about death, and try to stay conscious with somebody who said, I'm dying anyway, I would like to use my dying from a spiritual point of view in order to awaken and grow, and let's make it an ashram or a monastery in which people die instead of a dying center. It's a different thing. The focus is on the awakening, not on the dying. It just happens that the clientele is made up of half dyers and half caretakers. We did one in New Mexico, and that went for about 4 years, but it was too low a population center because people aren't very mobile in those conditions, so you got to go where people are when they get sick enough to need a dying center. So we're moving now to Marin, where conscious people may die, because the percentage of people that want to stay conscious through dying is very slim. I mean, this is a relatively conscious group, and very few of you will want to do that. Most of you will say, just get rid of the pain, you know, and like, for example, when you're dying, what do you look at? Most of the time you look at pictures of relatives and all those things which keep sucking you in more and more deeply to the identity you're trying to let go of. While in Japan, for example, in Pure Land Buddhism, when you're dying, they put at the end of the bed a screen that has on it the Pure Land, so you see where you're going. It's like a triptych. It's like a picture of St. John when you're sitting in New York City. In a week I'll be there, you know, and it gets you going like, ah, instead of like, oh, I'm going to miss Susie, you know. It's that kind of thing. And it's an interesting thing of what we think is a compassionate thing to do for a person at the time of dying. In terms of sights, sounds, feelings, experiences, all of it. And I think we're just at the edge of beginning to understand how to help a being move forward and be in this moment so that they're not pushing against it, even subtly. And to work with somebody that's dying, especially when you work with them over day after day after day, and you start to get emotionally attached to them, you begin to see how hard it is to not be so emotionally caught that you start to grab hold and you don't want them to go, and to allow them to go. You see that you have to keep working on yourself, keep working on yourself, keep working on yourself. I'm just going to read you a few little poems and quotes to introduce aging. This is from a card that I got from somebody. It said, just a line to say I'm living, that I'm not among the dead, though I'm getting more forgetful and more mixed up in the head. For sometimes I can't remember when I stand at the foot of the stair if I must go up for something or if I've just come down from there. And before the fridge so often my poor mind is full with doubt, have I just put food away or have I come to take it out? There are times when it is dark out with my nightcap on my head. I don't know if I'm retiring or just getting out of bed. So if it's my turn to write you, there's no need in getting sore. I may think that I have written and don't want to be a bore. So remember, I do love you. I wish that you were here, but now it's nearly mail time, so I must say goodbye, dear. ... There I stood beside the mailbox with my face so very red. Instead of mailing you my letter, I have opened it instead. ... I like my new bifocals. My dentures fit me fine. My hearing aid is perfect, but Lord, how I miss my mind. Then there's this one. This is a warning. I've been using this one for years. It's good. When I am an old woman, I shall wear purple with a red hat which doesn't go and doesn't suit me. And I shall spend my pension on brandy and summer gloves and satin sandals and say, we've no money for butter. I shall sit down on the pavement when I'm tired and gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bells and run my stick along the public railings and make up for the sobriety of my youth. I shall go out in my slippers in the rain, pick the flowers in other people's gardens, and learn to spit. You can wear terrible shirts and grow more fat and eat 3 pounds of sausages at a go, or only bread and pickles for a week, and hoard pens and pencils and beer mats and things in boxes. But now we must have clothes that keep us dry and pay the rent and not swear in the streets and set a good example for the children. We must have friends to dinner and read the papers. But maybe I ought to practice a little now, so people who know me are not too shocked and surprised when suddenly I am old and start to wear purple. Henri Amiel said, "To know how to grow old is the masterwork of wisdom, one of the most difficult chapters in the great art of living." To know how to grow old is the masterwork of wisdom, one of the most difficult chapters in the great art of living. Longfellow said, "For age is opportunity no less than youth itself, though in another dress. And as the evening twilight fades away, the sky is filled with stars, invisible by day."